The results of Wisconsin's historic recall election made dramatic headlines around the state this morning, with various newspapers giving different treatments.
Let's look at some of the headlines. The Wisconsin State Journal, under a patriotic banner, said it simply reaffirmed.
The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel dedicated its entire front page to the story as well. Walker wins historic recall.
Newspapers all across the state used the same picture of Walker pointing to his supporters, but they all had different interpretations. The Marshfield News-Herald says Walker prevails, while the Stevens Point Journal said Walker survives.
And finally, the La Crosse Tribune took a more impersonal approach. Recall fails.
So where do we go from here?
Political scientist Charles Franklin is back with a recap of an historic night. Thanks for being with us today, Charles.
Good to be here.
More voters, both sides got the turnout increased.
Absolutely. Turnout was about 350,000 more than it had been in 2010. So that's phenomenal turnout for a governor's race period, let alone a special election in June. But the turnout increase favored the Republicans a little bit more. There were about 158,000 more votes cast for Barrett than last time, but there were 205,000 more votes cast for Walker. So in that battle of turnout that we talked so much about ahead of time, turnout, when all was said and done, the Republicans got a bit of a gain from that turnout battle.
Governor Walker, from the very beginning, led in every single one of the polls, and he won last night with a bigger margin than he did in 2010. So does he have a mandate now?
I think he certainly has the ability to say, I've been reelected. My platform has been reaffirmed by the voters. And that was always the situation, that if he were defeated, then of course Democrats would take over. But if he was reelected, he would have that mandate, that reaffirmation of his control of the governorship. And the fact that the margin edged up a little bit from a 5-point to about a 7-point margin in favor of the governor is a small advantage. It's not gigantic, but it's in a small increment.
And this whole thing started with the recall signatures because of collective bargaining. And not all union members follow the party line.
That's one of the real striking things about where there are gaps in the Democratic coalition, at least if you think of your grandfather's Democratic coalition from the New Deal and FDR. 29% of union members said that they had voted for Scott Walker. 48% of people who live in a union household but are not themselves a member of the union voted for him, versus 61%, I think, of non-union households.
And this is based on exit polling?
Based on the exit poll. So, you know, that's a substantial amount of defection from unions to him. Overall, for union households, it was 37%, which is very close to what it was in 2010.
What do you think are the national implications? I know a lot of the exit polling looked ahead to the presidential race as well here.
And I think that's really, in many ways, the most fascinating and I think the most important part. Scott Walker won by 7. Barack Obama leads by 7 in this same exit poll. And we've seen that in the Marquette Law School poll by almost identical numbers as well. So the two really match up well. 18% of Obama voters said they voted for Scott Walker, and 6% of Romney voters said they voted for Tom Barrett. We look so much for that elusive undecided voter who might be a swing voter, and with just 3% undecided, it was hard to find them. But in that group, that's where you find them. These are people who are less motivated by partisanship and ideology and more willing to look at the candidates and say, well, this guy's doing a good job, that guy's doing a good job. Support them on those grounds.
There was some talk last night, too, that not everyone that voted for Walker supported him, but they were against the whole idea of a recall.
There is certainly some evidence for that. 60% say they think recall should only be used for cases of misconduct in office, not under the current system for any reason. But if you look at Walker's job approval numbers, in terms of his handling collective bargaining, 52% approve. In terms of his handling the job situation in the state, 54% approve. He won this election by a 53 to 46 margin. That's right in line with his job approval rating. There's not much room to believe that feelings about the recall process really pushed him up a lot. It's in line with his approval ratings.
And the numbers that you had for your final Marquette University poll, which you took some heat for.
We had 7. It ended up a 7-point margin. It ended up at 6.8.
Sometimes the polls are right.
I was happy.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, Charles.
We'll
Good
take
to
a
see you.
rest. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
August isn't far away.
Thank you, Charles.